I'm Archie Brown. I'm Emeritus Professor of Politics at Oxford University. At a time when there's a war going on in Ukraine, contacts with Russia have been minimized, and that's understandable. But I think it is very important to distinguish Russian culture from what's going on in Ukraine. And there are a great many people, millions of people in Russia, especially in the cultural field, who are very much opposed to this war. So I think that this prize serves a useful purpose. It brings to attention objective scholarship on Russia from many different disciplines and books. We're looking especially at books which will have an appeal to a general readership, not just specialists. So there are books by historians, political scientists, journalists. There are books on Russian music, Russian ballet, literature, as well as on geopolitics and contemporary Russian politics. The books must relate to Russia in some way, but published in English anywhere in the world. And I think it's a very important thing to do, more important than ever perhaps, at a time when people have washed their hands of Russia, that Russian culture will continue, relations with Russia will resume in the future, and it's all the more important to understand Russia and its history. Well, there were, for example, books which compared how people responded to Stalinism, a book about Russian architecture and how architects accommodated themselves to the kind of demands made by Stalin, and in music, because in every sphere of artistic life there was a conformist view, and people reacted to it in different ways. Some people bent the official line as far as they could, other people went further, others conformed and accommodated themselves. There were books on geopolitics. There's a book, for example, which looks at what's gone wrong in the post-war period, the post-Cold War period, I meant to say, when relations were so good, so warm between Western leaders and Russian leaders, at the end of the Soviet period with Gorbachev, early Yeltsin, and then there's been a deterioration. So it's very important to look at what's gone wrong, and of course, again, while we utterly condemn the war in Ukraine, it's important to see if perhaps mistakes were also made on the Western side in the past 30 years. And so at least one of the books addresses that question. So there are books on dissent in Russia, the books on Russian history further back, even going back to the 18th century, the English doctor Thomas Dimsdale, who inoculated Catherine II, Catherine the Great. So it's a very wide range of books, history, politics, culture, and of high quality. It's not easy. One of the books we've looked at is by Mary Sarraute, called Not 1 Inch, and that's about the expansion of NATO, which is a very controversial subject. The assumption now in the West is the more countries, European countries that join NATO, the safer we'll be. Now that may or may not be true. It's not entirely clear to me that it is true, but at any rate, it's an issue which exercised Russian leaders from Gorbachev through Yeltsin to Putin. So it's not just a question of Putin, that Russians, especially the Russian security, military apparatus, were very concerned about NATO expansion. For the East Europeans, and Central Europeans, this is something which they very much welcomed and very much wanted. So the book by Sarraute is quite a nuanced book. It makes clear that there are winners and losers, and that there are many countries in Eastern Europe who regard themselves as winners from NATO expansion, but in Russia there's quite a strong view that they were losers. So, whether the West was sufficiently sensitive to Russian security concerns or not, that's one of the themes. But I think it's very important to have this kind of nuance. At the present time, there is a tendency to say that only Russia is to blame for everything that's gone wrong. Well, certainly one can't get away from the fact that Russia is to blame for a brutal invasion of Ukraine. That's agreed. But in the 30 years leading up to that, there were mistakes on both sides. And so that book in particular is of relevance to the present crisis.